It's the Courts of Thunder Olympics recap episode. He's Greg Rosenthal. I'm Glenn Clark. Greg, the reason why we do this show is because it's supposed to be about joy. It's supposed to be about how much we love the sport, and we obviously are not doing this for money. We're just doing this for our fun, and because we love tennis so much, and we talk constantly about finding joy. And a few days ago, we did a show, and I was finding some joy, and I'm gonna need your help, pal, because I am all out of joy. The last 4 days for me as a tennis fan have sucked. Like they have just ripped the joy completely out of me. So we will talk about all of it. We'll talk about all the Djokovic stuff. We'll talk about the gold medal winners. We'll have all of these conversations, but I am desperate. Please give me somewhere where I could find some joy first.
Okay. Well, first of all, tennis, you love it. Sometimes it brings you pain. The more you love it, the more pain happens, the more it looks dark for a minute. But I do have some joy to give you.
All right, please.
I watched the bronze medal matches on tape, the end of both of those matches. The bronze medal match, and I know this feels off the point. It wasn't the gold, but it was Djokovic versus Carreño Busta.
Who I love, by the way. I haven't talked about this enough on the show. I'm a Carreño Busta guy, and I always
good. Someone needs to be. I don't feel he doesn't. I'm
a Carreño Busta guy, and I'm not gonna lie about it, Greg. It started because I just loved saying his name, like legitimately. That's how it all started, and I have from then been a Carreño Busta guy. I'm sorry that he was on the other side of the Djokovic collapse last year. Like I think he deserves. He was playing really well, and I wish that could have been seen through to see what might have happened.
Absolutely. And we sort of did. We sort of did it in this bronze medal match. So to set it up, of course, Djokovic lost, to Zverev. Carreño Busta lost to Khachanov. And so that sets up a day of action where it's the two bronze medals singles matches, followed by the women's gold medal match. The women's bronze, Svitolina, Rybakina, and the gold, of course, Bencic winning over Vondrousova. I think that was the best tennis day of the year. I think the two bronze medal matches were the two. Am I getting crazy here? Maybe the two best matches I've seen all year. That Olympics tennis brings out something special. And I get that most people probably weren't watching these in the middle of the night. I did not go back to watch all these matches, but because we're doing Courts of Thunder, and had some time on Saturday night, I flipped it on. Djokovic Carreño Busta was incredible. Carreño Busta played so well down the stretch, and I think for people who saw the score line, they probably thought, "Oh, Djokovic, what does this really mean to him? Third place."
Greg, I felt a little bit of that. I did. Even as I was watching, I felt a little bit of it.
He fought like crazy. Once he got into that third set, first of all, he was spent. Playing mixed doubles, bad idea for Djokovic.
Yep.
The weather, the emotions, everything. He was carrying it all like Serena was carrying that weight going into the U.S. Open semis against Irani. He was carrying it all. He sneaks out that second set in the tiebreaker when Carreño Busta chokes a little bit. Close set. Once Carreño Busta got up in the third, Djokovic was fighting like crazy. Those points were incredible. It took Carreño Busta 6 match points to win that match, and he didn't play bad on any of the first 5 of them. It was tense. It was like just beautiful tennis. And I thought actually Djokovic, even though you can criticize him for many things, including his racket smashes and everything, he was fighting his heart out there. He wanted it badly. And Carreño Busta stood up in every one of those matches. It's why the best of 3, I think, is better. It's why it's more unpredictable. Okay, you want men's tennis to be a little more unpredictable, make it best of 3 like the women, and stuff like this happens. I could keep going on and on, but I also want to connect it to the other bronze medal match. Svitolina
I thought, yeah, I did think this was great. And thankfully wasn't overshadowed by anything.
5-5 in the second set, digging out crazy shots, squash shots, everything, fighting, down 4-1 in the third, battling, but it wasn't Rybakina giving it to her. It took her how many match points? 7 match points. Yep. Let's throw in the mixed doubles final where a couple singles players who theoretically shouldn't care that much about it win on their 4th match points. Like the fight and the battle in all of these and what it meant to Svitolina and Carreño Busta to win those bronze medal matches, I think to me shows why the Olympics is so special. And I think why the quality of both of those matches were sky high. It was great tennis. It was great tension. They wanted that medal. They're not playing for rankings points anymore. They got rid of that. They're not playing for money. It's just pure tennis. And Carreño Busta said it. The end. I know I'm going on and on. He said, that was the best title in my career, even though it wasn't a title.
And
that was the best win of his career, even though it wasn't a thing. And you can't tell me that Djokovic wasn't fighting as hard as he possibly could, because I watched it. He was.
I watched not all of it. I watched a good bit of it. And I think you're right. I also don't know. It felt like he was in a place mentally. You know what? Now I'm getting the negatives. I'm avoiding it. We'll get to there.
Okay, that's possible, but that's tennis. I think that was true against Zverev too. Yep. Once that match started, took it around. It doesn't change. You just can't tell me the way he played those match points. I'm watching it and thinking, I knew the results already when I watched it. I'm like, actually, Djokovic might win this match. There's no way Carreño Busta has got to keep it going, but he kept coming up with big serves. He kept not allowing Djokovic to get the break points, and they're going back and forth. It absolutely was playing like a clay court in these slow conditions, and I think that's why you saw Svitolina, Bencic, Carreño Busta having some good results. Even Zverev, who I think actually is ultimately like a slow sort of player.
All right, so I'm with you, and I felt really good for Carreño Busta. I did. I felt quite good for him, a guy that I've liked for a while, and I felt good for him. And I felt good for Svitolina, who's a great story. And we talked about the unpredictability of women's tennis. I felt good about that. It's just that you're asking me to find joy in bronze medal matches, and that's
what it is. That it's all about the sport of it all. That's why I'm in this, is for just like sports. Sports are great. It's not about the rankings point. It's not about the endorsement. It's about the competition. And those were great. Rybakina, I don't think totally gave it up either. There was a couple spots in that match. I want to point out it was 5-5 in the tiebreak in the second set. And the two of them played just a bananas point. And the winner of that point gets set point. And it's the biggest moment in each of their careers. And Svitolina is digging out of every corner, getting every ball back. And then she's serving at 6-5. And you just played all this. And what does she do? She throws in this crazy, 89 mile an hour first serve spinner in up the tee that Rybakina just was did not know what to do with. She took 30 miles an hour up. Maybe she was tired, but I think she was just throwing her in off speed. And when I watched that whole match, and Svitolina is I don't know. She's Tom Glavine or Greg Maddux or something. She doesn't have the heat that all these others have, but
sure.
She played such a mentally smart match and wanted it so much. It was absolutely like a veteran pulling in a more inexperienced player, and you could almost see the intelligence. And I think you could see that out of Carreño Busta too. They said it on the broadcast, and I'll stop honking about these bronze medal matches, but I really think it was amazing. He was still breathing heavy 5 minutes later. It meant so much. I think it was the culmination of his career and Svitolina's. He used everything he has learned as a pro in all these situations to stay cool under fire, to stay aggressive. He was the aggressor against Djokovic and win that match. And I thought it was great tennis. I really did.
All right. I will give you the bronze medal matches were great tennis. I will give you that. There was really good tennis to be had there.
And it shows the purity that they're fighting that hard for the bronze.
Yeah, look, to be fair for these countries, right? Particularly, for the Ukraine, winning any medal at all is unbelievable. You know what I mean? It's an unbelievable accomplishment. Spain clearly is one.
It was the first medal for them in the entire Olympics, and Correct. It would have been the same for Rybakina that she had that weight on her too.
And that is part of the magic. I talked about that a few years ago in London, really being moved. I think it was Gimelstob who was doing the interview with Roger Federer after he won his semifinal, and he was moved to tears after the semifinal because he knew he had clinched the first medal of the Olympics for Switzerland by winning that semifinal. That you do get moments like that at the Olympics that are unlike anywhere else in tennis. So I give you that what that meant, very significant for those players, despite the fact they were bronze medal matches. Can I unload now? Can I unload on the things that didn't?
I've been honking too much.
Oh, all right, here we go. Oh, hang on a second. That was bad editing on my part. Yeah. Greg.
Yeah.
This tournament that I was so looking forward to became devastatingly painful to watch. To constantly watch players overwhelmingly affected by the heat, to artificially decide at some point, well, if you made it this far, now we'll change the time that the matches are going to be played. One day after Paula Badosa went out, one day after, we'll change the time.
She left with heat exhaustion for our listeners who might not have been tracking the Badosa
they should
match
have.
We were texting back and forth with as it was happening.
The first thing that Greg said to me, Greg texted me, he's like, wow, Paula Badosa and Kay are playing at the same time. And I said, dude, I do not like her body language. Like, it does not look good. And it did not take long after that for it to be over. It is difficult for me to stomach the idea. Like, you knew this was coming. You knew it was going to be hot in Tokyo. You knew these things were going to be a problem, and you just sort of put your arms up and were like, well, good luck. We'll see how it goes, to a tournament that a lot of players already didn't want to go to, and you're fighting to keep players interested in coming to the Olympics. That bugged me. Obviously, to go from there, I don't care all that much that Novak Djokovic didn't win, because I'm not a Novak Djokovic fan, but my God, could there be a worse result than Alexander Zverev winning the gold medal? It's the absolute worst possible thing that could have happened for tennis, and for me trying to get people to be interested in tennis. I cannot stomach celebrating or having any remote joy whatsoever in Alexander Zverev. And it didn't even give us a good gold medal. The gold medal match stunk. It was terrible.
Did not go back to rewatch that one.
No, there was nothing to rewatch. And I was up early on Sunday morning in order to be able to watch it, and it was unwatchable. It was horrendous how bad that match was.
Mm-hmm. Funny, we both probably were rooting for Djokovic for the first time in a while in the semis and in general, because I like the idea of him going for
the
history.
Yeah.
Once he dispatched Nishikori, I was okay, let's go for it. And then Zverev comes up with the biggest win of his career.
And then, so I couldn't celebrate anything related to the gold medal match on the men's side. I want to be able to celebrate Belinda Bencic. I want to be able to acknowledge this sort of seminal moment in her career, and what was mostly a pretty good gold medal match, but it's wildly overshadowed by the timeout controversy in the third set. And you know,
explain that for the listeners.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, Bencic goes up 4-3 on serve in the third set. And as Vondrousova is about to serve, she takes a timeout, a medical timeout, which, to be fair, is very much within the rules. She has like the tape changed on her foot and might even have needed to have it changed, right? Like, I'm not even saying she didn't need it. She might have needed that, but she purposely did it ahead of Vondrousova's serve. It's icing the kicker. It's the
you got to do it. You got to do it at a changeover. You can't do it in between games. So it's gonna be in front of her serve.
Correct.
Right?
But that's the problem with the rule. The rule allows for that. The rule allows for you to manipulate that situation. And going into Vondrousova, what proved to be her final service game, she had to sit and wait and stew and stand up and not know when she was going to serve and figure it all out. And then she proceeded to lose the 4 points, which, by the way, you know, credit to Bencic. She took advantage of the opportunity she gave herself. But it was abundantly clear that it was not necessary for it to happen in that moment. It was done strategically. I'm going to use this to my advantage.
Why are you so sure? Why are you so sure about that?
I mean, Greg, Greg, they showed her foot. It was fine. Everything was fine. There was no actual concern. She looked fine. She wasn't even remotely staggering as she was playing in the lead up to it. Everything was fine. She wanted to use it to her advantage. And I get it. That's what the rules allow for. The problem is
that's
the
bad
rule.
Job.
What do you mean?
I mean, no, that's a bad job. If what you're saying is right, I guess I don't totally assume that it was unnecessary, because usually when you're calling for that timeout, it's like when things are falling apart or you need to stop the momentum or whatever. But Bencic had won the previous game. It was 3-1 and then it was 4-3, but it was just a close, tight match. And the rules are weird in tennis when it comes to medical timeouts. I also saw Medvedev take one for cramps.
Well, he looked like he was going to die in that match, though. Like, I'm
right, which is why I'm lenient when it comes to Bencic, which is like Medvedev actually broke the rules because you can't take a medical timeout for cramps. That actually is against the rules.
Yeah.
And then he ended up winning that match. It was the match before he lost to Carreño Busta.
Yes, correct.
And I just kind of look at these conditions. It's so hot there. It's been such a long week. They're both playing, doubles and all this stuff, that I'm just like,
but
if you need a little timeout, I'll let you have it. Yeah. I'll let you have it.
This was about as late in the night as they had possibly played, because this was happening at like after 9:00 Eastern time. This was going on in the third set. So
still like 85 degrees and humid. I mean, to your heat point, I thought that because I've been to Tokyo in the summer, my family goes every year. And I just thought this whole lead up to the Olympics was like, this Olympics is going to be a nightmare. People don't realize it's New Orleans there in the summer. It's no different. It's 95 to 100. It's like 85% humidity. It's not like it was particularly bad this year. That's what it is every year for about 2 months straight. And I had a feeling the Olympics were going to be affected. Tennis more than any other event. It was, though.
Oh, it was crazy affected. I mean, it was awful. I mean, it really did make it painful. And by the way, it's why Fognini wasn't even mad at Medvedev. Fognini, in fact, was like trying to extend these breaks, and like, dude, this is hell. Like what we're dealing with right now. And that was, what
you can't say that decided the match, though. The bench.
I can't say it decided the match. I'm saying it clouds my ability to celebrate it. My ability to celebrate Belinda Bencic is clouded by what appeared. And again, you're right. I'm not in her head. I can't say with certainty what's going on, but the evidence presented appeared to be her purposefully taking advantage of a rule that allowed for her to ice Vondrousova, who was serving to stay in the match, essentially, right? Like she was, if she holds there, the match continues on. Instead, she goes down 5-3 and all Bencic.
That is dark. You are dark.
Dude, it's not me. It ain't me. It's everyone in the sport.
Bencic's reactions, after winning the semifinals and the finals, and I'm a sucker for that stuff. And it's funny, we talked about the women's quarterfinals, and I said, like, all these stories are like, would be so amazing. They're all so interesting. And I remember I threw out a little thing and I was like, well, Bencic, I'm not really sure what the story is there. And then the rest of them, I think that's also maybe what people are struggling with, which is unfortunate. Bencic, doesn't have like an easy narrative. She's like one of the big young hype women of the last 8 to 10 years. 16, 17 years old, gets to the finals of Canada, looks like she's the next big thing, struggles with injuries, ends up coming back in 2019 and finally kind of making good on that promise. Ended up as a top 10 player. She had a run in Dubai that was one of the best runs any women's player has had in any tournament in the last few years, just beating top 10 player after top 10 player. And that's like a master's level event. So for her, that was a big title, but no one's paying attention to Dubai. I don't even remember if it was Dubai or Doha that year. And since then, and this year hasn't really done much. She's still relatively young, 22, 23, but she's been struggling relatively, but she's been like a top 10-ish player, not like the most, easy, like stylistically, amazing player to watch. And so maybe didn't have the narrative that you could sink your teeth into, because this result and getting in the doubles final kind of came out of nowhere. She just had the best week of her life and is a talented player and got it done. But I don't know, like, what does that mean in the greater scheme of things? Maybe that's what you're struggling with a little bit too. Vondrousova to me is more entertaining to watch. After she took out Osaka and was just like, she beat Badosa and then beat Svitolina in what was a really really entertaining match. Mm-hmm. Like I was just like, okay, I'm in on Vondrousova just having this crazy run.
So it's a little bit that, but it's not. I wasn't particularly rooting for Vondrousova. I was good with either result at that point. It really, and it's not even. It doesn't change that she's a deserving champion. It's that the rule sucks so much that it takes out the ability for me to just have joy about celebrating a champion. It's that this is the only thing I can think about is this was such a competitive match that appeared to be tilting a certain way, and then this thing occurs, and I can't help but think about it. I
would say get over it. And if it was like at 6 p.m. Eastern and there was a full stadium, I don't think we're having this conversation. But this and the weather was better. It was just like there was a lot of things working against this, and this has resulted in a cranky Glenn Clark, which is totally understandable.
I think you're dismissing how controversial this was. I think you really are.
Maybe you're right.
I think you're being
trying to give her the benefit of the doubt that
and by the way, I do want to
the ankle tape. Right. I'm giving her the benefit of the doubt.
It was her toe.
Should she care about Vondrousova in that minute? Or should she care about getting her ankle taped if she is feeling like she needs it taped?
I want to be fair about this. She did have a blister. I want to make that very clear. She did have a blister. This wasn't fake. It wasn't that. It's that you're going to do it in this moment. It's that you start thinking about when you're going to do it, and you say, oh, I know exactly when I'm going to do it.
Maybe you're trying to hold it off and not do it at all, and you just can't hold it off anymore.
The problem is the rule. I'm not mad at Belinda Bencic. I'm really not. I'm not mad at her. It's not her fault the rule is written the way that it is. The rule has needed to be fixed for some time. You can't have the timeout occur before the other player serves. It's not fair in a sport where at that level, the serve is so significant. It's not fair to the serving player. The concept of tennis is that the game is supposed to be played at the pace of the server, correct? Like that's the way that the sport is supposed to exist. And so for someone to have to sit and stew and wait and wonder and all of that in that critical of a moment ahead of what proved to be the final service game of the night, that's not fair. It's not fair.
No, it's not fair.
Something that should exist.
I'm not caught up on who's serving, who's not. Like if Bencic was serving there, to me, that doesn't make a huge difference. If we're trying to fix the sport, I think there is something to be said with like, there's a deadline to take an injury timeout. Maybe that feels unfair too, but I don't think it's that crazy compared to other sports that like, once the third set started, maybe you don't get one, or once you're at a certain point in the third set, maybe you don't get one. Because I'm not hung up on who's serving, who's not. Was it a little bit of gamesmanship? Well, it gave you something to talk about.
Maybe. I understand what you're saying, but you can't there are still going to be legitimate injuries that are going to occur within the sport, right? So I don't know that you can get rid of medical timeouts altogether. I think that most players would agree if there's going to be a stoppage that I'm not in control of, right? Like that I'm waiting to find out for something. And you see this all the time. When somebody goes back to the locker room at the end, there's constantly
so you let Vondrousova serve and you do it mid you do it at 4-4 or something.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. You do it at 4-4. Okay. And then you're the one who's serving. You control how long when you're going to be serving again, because you're controlling when the timeout's going to be over. You're not sitting and stewing. You're seeing it all happen in front of you. You'll know when you get to go serve again at that point. And then
let's get to Djokovic. Let's hit another Thunder thing, because this is a lot of darkness here.
All right, fair enough.
Courts of Thunder.
You act like there's no darkness here.
This is more darkness. But I do want to handle it, because as much as Zverev winning gold is a significant result, Djokovic getting fourth is a bigger result.
Yes.
And everything around it too. I already talked about how I think just like, things cut up to him. He pulled out of the bronze medal match. Bad luck for Stojanovic, his partner, who didn't get to play for the mixed doubles final. Great luck for Ash Barty, who got to have get a bronze medal. I thought that would have been kind of fun. Barty versus Djokovic on a mixed doubles.
That would have been neat. Yes,
that would have been kind of neat. Losing that match to Zverev, I think the conditions, the pressure, everything is, it's just a reminder that this is hard. There's a reason only one tennis player in the history of the sport has ever won a Golden Slam, and that was Steffi Graf, 1998 or 1988, rather.
88, yes.
Man, that's hard. It's hard. And we said this was going to be hard. So the fact that Djokovic kind of just went away against Zverev is surprising.
Yep.
And lost the third set 6-1, but I think he was a little out of gas. The fact that he fought so hard for the bronze medal, to me, that bronze medal match was Djokovic writ large. Because I think if you watched it, on some level, I had to admire the effort he was putting out in the biggest of moments. I did. But as part of that match, he also is slamming his racket against the Olympic symbol on the net. He threw his racket. Now I'm losing track of if that was against Zverev in that match. He threw his racket in the crowd, something that Nadal, who's now in Washington, D.C., basically chose to play Washington, D.C., a 500 level event over going to the Olympics, which is fascinating, is calling out Djokovic by name, saying you shouldn't be acting like that as the number one player. And I think he's right. But what no one, that is just seeing these highlights saw was no one is more gracious to Carreño Busta after the match than Djokovic. It's really interesting, the hug at the net and the way that they talk and the way Djokovic talks after. And I feel like if he wasn't, if he was the opposite of that, we would be killing him for it. And yet I don't think it's genuine. He gave Carreño Busta his due and everything after, and seemed genuinely happy for Carreño Busta in that moment. And the way he spoke afterwards was completely giving a credit. And that's the thing with Djokovic. It's dude's got multitudes. He's a complicated guy.
Yes.
I think there's a lot to criticize and there's a lot to admire. And that's sort of who he is and where he is in the tennis, landscape. It's not all a villain or not all a good guy.
Yeah. Yes, 100. And there's so much here, Greg, as you allude to. I guess, on the tennis front, as we talked about beforehand, this changes nothing. There's no, but if he somehow wins the U.S. Open, this does not take anything away from it that he didn't win. This was just going to be icing on the cake.
Do you think it helps him?
No, I don't. I don't think it helps. I don't think it. I know he's a driven person, but I don't think that there's any way for Novak Djokovic to be more driven. I just don't think there's any extra edge that he could possibly get. I think there has to be a limit to that. I don't think it hurts him necessarily either, unless there is something to the shoulder thing, right? Unless that's, I think everybody seems to think that that's kind of fake, that he just didn't really want to play in the mixed doubles final and his shoulder's fine. And
I've never seen him look as old and gassed as he did, just breathing wise, in his last couple matches. And I just think he was exhausted.
I think he's played a lot of tennis in really terrible conditions. Yeah, right. I think
that's what I mean. There's part of me that thinks maybe pinning the balloon, taking the air out a little bit, maybe isn't so bad, that he doesn't have this crazy undefeated weight on him that he's trying to hold together of being perfect. I know the 2000 Patriots, I know it's so different, but the 2000 Patriots, to a man, sort of agree that carrying that week after week after week was really heavy. Losing that week 17 game against the Giants, for instance, might not have been a bad thing for them. Serena, trying to finish the Grand Slam. I'm just wondering if it allows him at all to.
But he's still going for the Grand Slam. You know what I mean?
Right. I get it. But it's maybe it just takes a little bit off that. It's people know how hard it is and it's not unbeatable. But who knows? Or it starts a 2-year struggle fest, which is what happened when he lost to Sam Querrey in Wimbledon, and he lost his confidence and was not quite the same guy mentally. So who knows?
To get into some of the other stuff, and I hate doing this. I often refer, part of the problem is people that don't really understand tennis try to talk about tennis, and they flip out about these things. I'm not trying to justify Novak Djokovic's actions necessarily, But every time we have this conversation, we have to remember how insane the sport of tennis is, and that there is literally no comparison. When someone tries to compare a tennis player to someone else within the realm of sports, there is no sport in the world with the isolation of playing tennis. And no one talked more about this in an era before mental health was ever discussed than Andre Agassi. And if you've never read his book, and I know that part of this is that I'm an Andre Agassi obsessed human being, but if you've never read his book, to understand the mental makeup of a tennis player, I would greatly encourage you to go do so, because the insanity of standing out in the heat for hours without the ability to talk to someone is something that cannot be compared to any sport in the history of humanity.
Plus, you're calling the plays midpoint every point.
Correct.
No one's calling the plays for you. You know,
it's why regularly we revisit the coaching topic, right? Regularly, someone within the sport.
I think boxing has always been the comparison, and I get it. I think boxing, it's so different physically, but I think mentally, it's probably the one sport that's the most.
It's the closest for sure, but at least you get to go back to a corner at some point and talk to someone if you want. You can at least say something if you're physically in a place where you're capable of doing it. That doesn't exist in tennis. It's you and your mind and whatever demons. Greg, I'm not someone who's dealt with a lot in the world. Like, my mental health has largely been pretty good in my life, but I started running a few years ago because I was particularly out of shape, and I had a friend who was really involved in the running community locally. And I have openly discussed, when I go running, I hear things. Like, it is not a pleasant time for me. It is really unpleasant. I legitimately
don't run.
Yeah. Oh, I prefer to not run, right? Like, I just prefer that. But I
play a different sport. There's other good.
Like, I have to do if I go running, I have to do things like list all of the bands that I've ever seen in my life in my head to prevent my brain from wandering. It's a very real thing that human beings deal with. It's very real. And I'm not telling you that means I'm okay with some of the things that Novak Djokovic has done. Thank God what happened in New York last year didn't end up being more devastating for the person who was on the receiving end of it, right? Like, I'm not suggesting it makes it okay, but all of that context has to come into play. And to say, well, other athletes don't act like this. Other athletes aren't playing this sport, this insane, isolated, mentally. There's no way to compare what a basketball player does, or there's just no way that you can't. They're not the same in any way.
Doesn't mean you shouldn't have some sort of like punishment or
I get it.
A little more strict way to deal with some of the throwing a racket in the crowd thing. It's like,
I'm not suggesting
just be easy. Just like lose a set. Like, if you just made it lose a set, like they wouldn't throw it in the crowd. But you know what I mean? It's just happen.
I am with you. I'm not trying to suggest that it's okay. I want to make that very clear. I'm not trying to suggest that it's okay. I just think the context is important to the conversation. I think it's doubled by two things that were going on. One, Novak Djokovic, his last two particularly high-level tantrums have something in common. No one was in the stands. It's very interesting to me, and I don't know what to make of that, right? Like, I don't know if there's a correlation between those things. He's never been the most beloved player, but he's fed off a lot of that negative energy during the course of his career, and I don't know how.
No one's been more vocal in an empty stadium than Djokovic either. If you follow tennis, you'll know what I'm talking about. So, some of these matches over the last year and a half, when he wins like a quarterfinal in like Rome and there's no one in the crowd and he screams at the top of it, you're just kind of like, whoa, dude, like, I love the fire. Can you just, you're just kind of like scaring the kids. Yeah, like my kids are watching and they're just like, yikes.
Well, or him undressing his camp, right? Just losing his mind after every like one point in a match that he'll go on to win. So that's jumped out at me a little bit in all this, and it's conflated with this bizarre social media thing that occurred last week where people attempted to twist an answer that he gave to a question to make it somehow related to Simone Biles. And I shouldn't have to come here to defend Novak Djokovic. One, because there's nothing fun about that. Like, who wants to defend Novak Djokovic? But it speaks to how gross our methods of getting information have become, and how brainless we have become as a society, that somehow Novak Djokovic's answer to an innocuous question was purported to be a shot at Simone Biles
and Osaka.
Yeah, and correct.
And I came up, getting paid in sports media by aggregating. I was at RotoWorld, and this was just I had all sorts of rules, and you would see people that were doing bad aggregation and all this stuff. So I have a lot of thoughts on like aggregation in general. And it is crazy because this came down to one guy on Twitter seeing a quote on a sheet and misapplying it. I don't know why he did. He was just like, he probably was just like hoping that this story would be a story. And then countless news outlets ran with it. And the backstory was they asked about Djokovic and mental health, and he gave a pretty long answer, as Djokovic is wont to do. Mm-hmm. He fills up a notebook.
Yep, he certainly did.
And as part of it, a question that's sort of started Biles-ish, he turned to himself and talked about how important mental health is for himself and the struggles he's had over his career and ups and downs. It was a pretty thoughtful answer, actually. It was sort of the exact answer you would want. And for whatever reason, this one tweet basically starts it that thinks he's talking about how that Simone Biles needs to have this mental strength. And no, he was talking about himself, and it was after a long preamble of how he has to like build himself up and all this stuff, and it got taken out of context. And it's too bad, because like we just pointed out, there's plenty to criticize Djokovic for, and this was just an example of like, and I've seen it with Osaka too. I've seen the Osaka story get conflated in the Olympics too as a huge mental health conversation in terms of what happened in the Olympics, as if she like gave up. I basically seen that. It's like she gave up. It's like, no, you didn't watch the match. Like Bondrosova, by the way, steamrolled everyone else for another 3 rounds, like top level players. And it's like, no, she just lost that tennis match. Like those two things are separate.
And then she lost a tennis match after she hadn't played at that level in some time, which
doesn't mean she wasn't like feeling pressure and all that. But like it just was like, people are just sort of making arguments, and they're the people that you're usually on their side, but just doing it in like a clumsy way.
Correct. And it's as I say all the time, none of this means that racism isn't real. None of this means that the people that have said terrible things about Simone Biles are awful. It doesn't mean. It's just trying to use this. There is no there. These two things did not intersect. There was nothing said by Novak Djokovic about Simone Biles or Naomi Osaka. It did not occur. It did not happen.
Right.
And
it's a good to point out.
Yeah. If you want to look at what he said and then juxtapose that against his own actions in a tennis match, that's not unfair.
Right. Like, I mean, he is a guy who talks a lot about like, he does the yoga and how he's calm all the time, and you can see he has to do all that because he's fighting some demons, and those demons come out.
Yep, no doubt about it. All right, oh boy, begrudgingly we have to talk about it.
We can be quick. We've gone long. I mean, Zverev won the gold.
I don't have a lot to say here. Look, the man's a very talented tennis player and has been pointing towards these types of results at some point.
Won a World Tour Finals. So if there is such a thing as a 5th slam, it's either the Olympics or the World Tour Finals. I would say the Olympics is another level up, but he has won that before, and he's won, multiple Masters titles, which, back in the day was very hard to break through. And I think he's won 4 by now. So he's won big titles, but none as big as this ever.
Look, this was coming, that he was going to have some sort of breakthrough. It is particularly difficult knowing allegations that have been made against him. It is almost impossible to feel anything good about Zverev. It's not surprising that he would have a big result. I don't know what else there is to say. I think he's going to be a factor for some time at big tournaments for as long as he's playing. And it's a difficult thing. I don't know what it's like. Like if you're a diehard Kansas City Chiefs fan, I don't know how you handle, and you're a reasonable person. I don't know how you handle Tyreek Hill being a part of your team. I don't know what you do about that. I don't know how Yankees fans handle Aroldis Chapman. I don't know how that goes. I don't know that I could be comfortable celebrating those people ever. And it's not because I've convicted them. It's because there's enough there that I'm uncomfortable. Like, it's the end of it. I can't celebrate it. I can't feel good because there's enough there that I'm uncomfortable about. I don't know everything, but there's just enough there that I'm uncomfortable about, and I can't celebrate Alexander Zverev winning a gold medal.
Yeah, I'm not a fan, and I don't like the way like he handles media, other players, everything. He sort of is like the stereotype of a tennis brat. Now, I do think we can talk a little bit just about the X's and the O's. I think this result was coming on hard courts. I think he's, was quietly playing pretty well leading into the clay and grass season. That was a little up and down. I've seen him play a lot this year. He's beaten the crap out of Nishikori over and over. And I think his hard court game has been coming, and it was, and that for him to breadstick Djokovic and then to go 3-1 on Khachanov. Zverev actually had an extremely easy draw until the semis. But to be able to do that, he's a big time player who plays like a he's a 6'6" player who often plays like a 5'8" player. And it's very frustrating to have that good of a serve. And then he has the yips on his second serve, and he doesn't swing out on the backhand and forehand too often. And he just starts playing very passive. Wasn't the case. I think these conditions helped him. I think slowing a court down is ultimately good for him, because he still hit through it. He played super aggressive. If he plays aggressive like that, it's just, he's right there. It's now, does he kind of take the lead over Medvedev and what he's accomplished? Sure. I mean, but those two guys and Tsitsipas, it's like, those are the three, and they keep stacking up stuff. And even though Zverev, it hasn't been like a straight line, he's ultimately got the best results of anyone. If you just want to like point out who is the best player 25 and under on their results, it's Alex Zverev.
That's probably true.
I mean, in terms of Masters, he's had ups and downs because he was so good when he was 18 and 19 that he's been at the top of the game for a while, and he's number 5 in the world. He's been a top 5 player now for 4 years. That's pretty hard to do, and so we'll see if he can hold his nerve and best, in the biggest moments. But he like if he's playing on a hard court against Nadal like tomorrow, I'm saying Zverev is the favorite. It's like agree. He's right there. And so that it's just an interesting thing, X's and O's, to add to the mix as we head to the US swing, which is my favorite part of the year. Toronto, Cincinnati. Should that be our last Courts of Thunder? A little look ahead, or should
well, you want to hit it one more time? I got nothing. I really have nothing else. I just don't. I can't. I don't want to. So we'll hit it one more time.
Courts of Thunder. Well, I've heard, from a lot of listeners that were like, I didn't know I needed like a little dose of like this level of analysis. In my
sure.
Somewhat
I appreciate it. I just don't like talking about it. It's a very tricky thing for me, man. I'm sorry. I've made it very clear. This is my line. This will always be my line. I don't need everybody
tennis needs villains. You don't want the villain to be because of how he acted in his personal life, unfortunately. Correct. I find Zverev villainous enough in his playing style. He plays matches I don't want to watch. That's because of the way he plays. I think he makes other players worse, which is so weird with how, what his gifts are. That he tries to just ugly it up, and that's one of the reasons why I've never like embraced Carreño Busta. Ultimately, that's kind of Carreño Busta. He plays tennis like I do.
You're not wrong. Yeah,
that's how I play tennis too. I mean, it's just like, let's get into a marathon. Let's ugly it up. Can you outlast me? Can you be mentally tougher? And Zverev plays like that, but I'm like, bro, man, you're 6'6" and you're like fast as hell. And
what's funny is that like I yell at myself for not playing like that more. I'm like, why are you trying to hit? Just keep going. Grind. I'm headed to DC this week.
The City Open, a 500 level event with Rafael Nadal.
Yep, and a bunch of Americans. Lots of Americans and Rafael Nadal. I'm going to head down there. I think I'm going to be there for Rafa on Wednesday. I think I will be down there.
You should go right now, Glenn.
I know.
In 3 hours after this taping.
Kay is playing on Monday.
Hey, by the way, I don't need to hear from you NFL teams about playing at 10 a.m. on a Sunday after traveling on your private jet 2 days before because of the time change. Katie Shikori just lost at the Tokyo Olympics on Thursday, and he's playing a tennis match on Monday.
Wild. That is wild.
Last I saw, Hachinov still in the draw. I don't know if that's got. He had a bye, so I'm not sure if that's gonna.
Yeah, they stagger the first few nights, and there's no women's side of the City Open anymore either.
It's the only tournament this week, and then Canada's next week.
Yep.
And Cincinnati's the week after that, and then 2 weeks after that is the U.S. Open. And if you like hardcourt tennis, Masters level tennis, Canada into Cincinnati, especially with the time zone, is the best 2 weeks that isn't the U.S. Open all year, and it's right before it.
Well, and it gets some ESPN coverage, so it broadens the people. Like, there's a broader group of people that like might find these matches. The fields are good.
Everyone's going to be in these. We'll see if Djokovic returns for Cincinnati. There's no way he's not playing Canada. He already withdrew. But Serena should be back. I think in Cincinnati. She should want to play a warm-up. Osaka, I think Osaka will be back in Cincinnati. We'll see. She hasn't announced it, but I think she's going to want to play. So everyone should be back, and most of them will be back in Canada. Almost everyone's going to be back.
And these are places where like the crowds are really into it. Like, these are great events. Actually, the DC crowd is pretty into it too, even despite the fact it's a lower level event. But these are places that have great crowds for these events. So I'm with you. It's a very cool portion of the schedule. I also like the Indian Wells Miami back-to-back. Like, that's one of my favorite parts of the schedule too. But this is a great portion of the schedule.
We're just Americans. We like it in our time zone.
It really, I'm not going to lie about it. It has a lot to do with it. I am excited though but
the fields are bigger. The tournament, just to explain, is like, it's normal this year in that, it's the biggest tournament along with Indian Wells. I think Indian Wells goes 96. Canada, and they get it done all in a week. So it's compact. It's basically got every top 50 player that there is. So should we do a recap show?
I'd love to. Maybe
even midweek shows. We'll see.
Oh boy, that's asking a lot.
I think we'll just do recaps after each of them.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good with that. They're great tournaments. I went to Cincy once, loved it. It was one of my favorite spots. I love that. All right, man. Appreciate you trying to help me through all of the awful feelings that I have about being a tennis fan after this week. I just was such a major and I was so happy when we did that show. We were celebrating Paula and Kay. I'm like,
just let them have their bronzes. I mean, it was the best moment of Nishikori's career in Rio to beat Nadal. It's the best moment of Carreño Busta. It's like the participation award, the bronze, for like these longtime tour guys, that don't get their Grand Slam moment. Come on,
man. All right. I'll give you that. All right. He's Greg. I'm Glenn. This has been Courts of Thunder. Please continue to share all of those things. But this has been Courts of Thunder.